Welcome to Ecofeminism. I'm your instructor, Rachel Hansen. Now, just here in the chat, I've just put in the written module that is referencing what we'll be talking about tonight. So if you don't have it, now you do. Now we do, as ever, have a little bit of housekeeping to get out of the way here before we dive right into our readings for the week here. Now, of course, there is a syllabus for this course, and you can click on that link in the written module just to take a look at it, see what we've got coming up here. But of course, everything will continue to be linked here. And by here, I mean in the written module every week. Now, speaking of the readings, there is free access to everything that we are reading. But if you have interest to purchase any of the books that we're using, I do request that you purchase them from my Linktree shop. It's not any extra cost to you, and I do make a small commission when you do that, and it is appreciated. And then this last piece is really more housekeeping if you have been around for a little while. Now, previously to this point in the school year, the 2025-2026 academic year, modules were coming out on Monday with a live lecture like this on Wednesdays. The only small change is that the written module is landing in your inbox now on Sunday instead of on Monday. Now, my own written commentary for our topic this week, which is bioregionalism and sense of place, is a little on the light side, but it's also really very much on the light side because I want to invite you to kind of think about kind of where you're locating yourself within this topic. So we're going to start with our first article, which I guess really more of an essay article. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. Searching for Common Ground, Ecofeminism and Bioregionalism. Now, really, without naming it, we have already started talking about bioregionalism. You might remember last week when we were talking about the chickpo or tree huggers and the yarning activists in the Pacific Northwest in the United States. Now, what bioregionalism is really well defined within this article by Judith Plant. And what Plant has to say, and I quote, "Bioregionalism means learning to become native to a place, fitting ourselves to a particular place, not fitting a place to our predetermined tastes. It is living within the limits and the gifts provided by a place, creating a way of life that can be passed on to future generations." End quote. Now, when I was kind of writing up this module, one thing that I really was thinking about is the implications that this has for climate change. Of course, this article was written in 1987, and while climate scientists were sounding the alarm, regular day-to-day people were not necessarily living with the impacts of it. Right now, this article is written fresh off the heels of the Clean Air Act of 1970 in the United States. And I really would guess that maybe ecofeminists were feeling positive about our broad ability to become native to a place. Unfortunately, that imagined optimism on my part is not something that really has been realized. right, it was just last Thursday. And forgive me, by Thursday, I mean Wednesday, that a lot of us in kind of the Great Lakes region of the United States were bleary eyed and with our sore throats because of wildfire smoke, both from our Canadian neighbors and also from right here in Minnesota. Um, so it's a real pickle. There's no doubt about that. Um, but as I started to think about bioregionalism even a little bit more, um, over this past week, I found myself really reflecting on kind of what happened before to bring us to this point. Now, I have shared, here in this online space before about my ancestors colonizing the Western United States, very specifically Utah, mostly. And when the Mormons were making their way to what they then called Zion, one of the prophecies that was leading them was that they would make the desert blossom as the rose, which I hope you'll forgive me. I believe that that is a prophecy from that is actually found in the Bible in the book of Isaiah. But don't quote me on that one. And so you really have to think about people of European descent, very specifically, coming to this part of the world, and rather than fitting themselves to the place, making the place try to fit them and using their faith in what I would view as an unfortunately misguided way to make the place fit them. And so when I think about Plant's invitation to consider what, and I'm quoting again, an ecologically sustainable human culture, end quote, would look like, a really big piece of how I'm thinking about that is really thinking about decolonizing our the way that we think about the natural world. And that can show up in a bunch of different ways, right? Of course, I was just thinking about it in the form of your ancestors colonizing a place. But just as I'm speaking here, I'm thinking about a paper that I saw presented at the Tolkien Society Westmoot this past May. My internet friend Holly presented a really excellent paper on Tolkien's on J.R. Tolkien's love of the natural world and how that showed up in how he portrayed the hobbits throughout the legendarium. But and this is no shade to Holly at all. And Holly, if you were watching this later, hey. But Holly very specifically described bringing civilization to nature. And so when I'm thinking about ecologically sustainable human culture, what I would invite us to consider is the ways in which civilization was already in nature, in a way that is sustainable and is really people focused. So that really is kind of something for you to think about there. Now, as we're moving on here through the module, we're moving on to our next article, called Community, Meeting Our Deepest Needs by Helen Forsey. And I really, truly believe that we can't live bioregionally without a strong understanding of community. And that's really what Helen Forsey invites us to think about as we are reading this article. Now, community, of course, can show up in a bunch of different ways. But ultimately, to be effectually called community, it needs nonviolent. But really, within that nonviolence, also reminding us that humans are messy. We're just a big old mess a lot of the time. And so it can be really easy, right, to say that we're building community, but a little bit more difficult to do in a meaningful way, when the rubber really hits the road. But, of course, community is humanity's next evolutionary step. And I would argue, kind of going back to our conversation last week about matriarchy, community is our next evolutionary step, but it is a step that we've taken before, and therefore can definitely take again, if we can really find it within ourselves to kind of hang our pride by the door. So really, just a little something for you to think about. What does it look like to kind of ditch the ego to build something that is, again, life-affirming and nonviolent in all the facets that nonviolence can really show up. Now, I am just now realizing that I neglected to include a link to, to our last article here, which is A Society Based on Conquest Cannot Be Sustained. Native Peoples and the Environmental Crisis. Now, that's a little embarrassing. Now, I am going to put that in the chat, and I will modify this written module later on. Now, if you have not ever heard of Winona LaDuke, oh boy, I'm very glad to have you here with me to talk about her, because I think that she's basically the coolest. But apparently I cannot find a link and talk at the same time. So there we go. Okay. So this is an article, or this is an essay that's found within the book that we've already been using for the last few weeks, which is Toxic Struggles. All right. Now, Winona LaDuke within this article reminds us that Indigenous or land-based societies understand that all life is accountable to natural law. And forgive me, that was a quote. But more than that, that this level of accountability really, and meaning accountability to natural law, really flies in the face of the conquest-based culture that currently inhabits much of North America. Now, Winona LaDuke, which she is much more eloquent, I think, than I am, which is why I will never be, presumably, a vice presidential candidate for a party of any kind. My big takeaway from this article was really how can we just collectively slow our roll in a very serious way to take the time that we need, and I think that we probably need a lot of it, to regain our ability to understand natural law and our impact on the environment. And it kind of goes back to what I was just saying a couple of minutes ago about putting our egos on the shelf. Because it can be really difficult to wrap our heads around the ways in which we are not living in a way that is really in harmony with the environment around us. Both as individuals, of course, but also, I would say maybe a little bit more to the point, corporations. And I would also view that as an extension of policymakers. Because I think that as individuals, we are much more likely to make decisions that benefit us and the environment if we're not ultimately too fatigued by the world around us to really make a positive difference and to make better choices. Now, that is almost everything that I have for you this evening, but I did want to very specifically call out Clyde's comment in the written module this week. And he shared that he takes time to disconnect from tech and just breathe to connect to the world around him. And so it's not lost on me, even a little bit, that Clyde and others are spending their time, on Wednesday evenings with technology and with me to talk about some of the topics. So thank you for your time this week and every week. And I am looking forward to being back in your inbox this coming Sunday, being July 26th. And then back here with you face to face, same time, next Wednesday, July 29th, for a conversation that is really grounded in agriculture and biotechnology. So I think that one is going to be really fun, and I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are too, and I will see you all soon.